come forward. We've got a nice tight room, so we can
We could
make a bit more, interactive, kind of like a round table system.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We are live now. Hi, this is Sophie. So good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of the University of Melbourne, I'm delighted to welcome you, whether you've joined us online or are here in person at the center. My name is Alia Khan, and I work as the General Manager of the Melbourne Global Center, Delhi. We at the university begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded lands on which the University of Melbourne teach, learn, work, and operate. I pay my deepest respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Today's special, it's historic because the University of Melbourne has organized this event named Innovation Without Borders, which is the first ever international edition carved out of the flagship university festival called the Melbourne Connect during its Innovation Week held at the university campus. Let me try to draw the frame for today's discussion for all of us. This event shines a spotlight on the dynamic innovation ecosystems emerging between Australia and India. Through today's panel and networking reception, we'll explore how startups, researchers, institutions across both nations are forging impactful partnerships and driving global change. Positioned at the intersection of research, entrepreneurship, and international collaboration, the Innovation Without Borders aims to highlight the power of cross-border innovation to tackle shared challenges and reimagine the possibilities. Innovation Week is about connection. Over the 5 days across 2 countries with more than 25 partners and 30 plus events, we are exploring how education, research, and industry push boundaries in AI, sustainability, health, creative industries, and so on and so forth. Today, our global center becomes part of the successful journey, and it gives me immense pleasure to announce that we bring a part of the celebration to India by hosting this fraction of the event here at this lovely center, which is a platform for the university in India to engage meaningfully on matters of shared importance. And it reflects our deep commitment to the Australia-India relationship, one of the most vital international partnerships for the university. In this meeting, we will explore innovation without borders, both figuratively and literally, and find the unique pathways and opportunities of association. Our panel will share their stories and journeys and their roles in innovation across borders and how these can shape revolutionary future ecosystems around the world to meet the shared challenges of our current times. Through this partnership, we aim to develop educational capacities by co-creating advanced teaching and learning programs. Our collaborations are grounded in mutual respect and shared goals and belief in the power of research, education, and novelty to shape better future for all. While in Australia, the university has created Melbourne Connect as a fast-paced, impactful, action-packed program, I can't not mention that in India, the momentum is no less inspiring, owing to our bold ambitions, strong policy support, and a thriving innovation culture, turning ideas into impact across borders and disciplines. After this extensive and hopefully motivating overview about our congregation today, let's dive into stimulating conversations with our eminent speakers. And let me begin by introducing and welcoming our first panelist, Mr. Andrew Carter. Mr. Carter is the Trade and Investments Commissioner, South Asia, for the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, which is also called Austrade, and heads the Austrade's investment team in South Asia, working from New Delhi. He was appointed in India in 2023 after China, where he led Australia's educational promotion across Greater China. I request Andrew, if I may, to please share his thoughts and insights on today's subject. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you. Would you like me to stand?
Thank you.
Or-
Yes.
Online.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Well, hello. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you. So thank you to the University of Melbourne in particular for the invitation. I hadn't had the chance to visit this centre yet, and I always welcome opportunities to celebrate education. It's such a powerful and positive force in the bilateral relationship between Australia and India. So, I'm from the Australian Trade and Investment Commission here at the High Commission. We're with Australia's national trade promotion and investment attraction agency, and we play a very practical, commercially focused role supporting Australian business. And we're also responsible for promoting Australian education to the world. I've been asked to give a government perspective on innovation, Australian education and the bilateral relationship. But firstly, why Australia? Australia is an innovative nation. Our universities are at the heart of that endeavour, and our universities support multidisciplinary research and encourage our students to work in teams to develop bold, creative solutions. And our discoveries are helping billions of people globally. From the bionic ear, the cervical cancer vaccine, high-speed Wi-Fi, Google Maps, Australian innovations are changing the world. Important to note as well that university research not only leads to new products and new industries, it also informs public debate, improves our health and well-being, and helps solve complex problems. It adds to our understanding of history, culture, and society. So metrics. Even though Australia is home to just 0.3% of the world's population, we produce around 3% of the world's research, and more than 90% of our research is rated at world-class or higher. Important to the way our universities do what they do are their extensive international linkages and partnerships to help foster research collaboration, student exchanges, and global impact. International education is a very important part of that story, and we're one of the world's leading destinations. In the India-Australia context, the hundreds of thousands of Indian students who have studied in Australia have that connection to Australia and create a powerful and permanent human bridge between our nations. I was delighted to see actually that in this year's IDP education rankings that Australia has surpassed the US, UK and Canada to be the most preferred study destination for Indian students. So our student leagues are big and promising, but they also occupy a very special place in the bilateral relationship because education is deeply personal and builds connections and understanding. So for the government perspective on the bilateral relationship, it's at a historic high point. We're in our 5th year of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Underpinning that are common interests and a shared view of the world. So our strategic alignment is helping push our relationship forward. And we see our economic relationship continuing to grow. We have a free trade interim agreement, AI-ECTA, and that's already delivering benefits. Over 85% of Australian goods exports by value to India are now tariff-free, rising to 90% by January. And since it was signed, we've seen Australian exports rise significantly. So there's a window to India. So there's a window of opportunity to capitalise on that agreement, and we're trying to take that further, negotiating an ambitious, comprehensive FTA. But I wanted to make the point when we talk about complementarity that Australia is also a growth opportunity for India. And over the past 5 years, while India's global exports have increased 35%, exports to Australia have increased 66%. And India is particularly important to Australia because of our education and our migration links. It's Australia's largest source of skilled migrants and second largest source of international students. And today we have around 1 million Australians of Indian ancestry. So it means we have a sizable part of the Australian community that has advantages and familiarity in engaging and navigating India. I also wanted to use this as a chance to highlight the government's economic roadmap for India that was released earlier this year, which sets out 4 superhighways of economic growth, the strongest areas of economic opportunity bilaterally, and they are education, agribusiness, clean energy, and tourism. So with an innovation lens across these sectors, in education, India is rising to become one of our most important knowledge partners. So I've touched on student mobility, but we are seeing a whole web of deeper academic collaboration. Several Australian universities setting up campuses or centres like this one here in India. Agribusiness, it's not just about Australian food and beverage exports to India. We see huge potential in ag tech cooperation across productivity, soil, water, traceability, a host of fields. And in clean energy, Australia is pushing ahead in the energy transition and has created a lot of innovation. One of my favourite facts in this space is the base technology in a lot of today's solar panels. The PERC cell was developed out of Australian universities. We're the world leader per capita in household solar PV deployment. 4 million households in Australia have solar PV on their rooftops. That's a very high share in our context, but India is racing to achieve more than that, 10 million in just 4 years. So that's an obvious opportunity for us to work together. We've been at this for decades. So we've got great expertise, capability in this spaces from our own journey. There's an incredible opportunity for Australian companies, innovators to work with India as it ramps incredibly fast in this space. It's also an opportunity area for Australian companies to leverage India's unrivaled capacity to manufacture at scale. So one example of that, a company that we have worked with has developed an innovative modular approach to solar panels, and they've paired up with one of India's largest solar panel manufacturers to develop that product in India and for global markets. They're able to work together. They've got that advantage of Australian innovation, but the Australian company can scale and have global reach in a way that they wouldn't otherwise been able to do. So the key takeaway from my comments is that Australia has deep expertise, well aligned to India in fields like agri-tech, renewable energy, water management, health tech. And for an Australian researcher, an Australian company, India has a large youthful research talent base and world-class strengths in fields like data analytics, biotech, mobile applications. So Australian researchers and companies can also benefit and learn a lot from Indian partners on scalability and cost efficiency. I also want to highlight a couple of programs. So the government stands strongly behind opportunities for Australia and India to team up across cutting-edge technology sectors to create impact together. So fields like artificial intelligence, biotech, clean energy, digital education, our partnership can help solve global challenges and unlock new opportunities. I think a perfect example of that is the India-Australia RISE Accelerator. That's a program that's been running for a few years that offers startups from both countries mentorship, funding, collaboration to scale their innovations globally, especially in climate technology. So what a thing to celebrate. Startups from both nations joining forces to address some of the biggest environmental issues. Austrade, my agency, we're also delivering a range of national priority programs in India relevant to the innovation space, such as the Digital Education Hub, the Future Skills Initiative, and the Australia-India Innovation Network. So that last one, the Innovation Network, that plays a crucial role in connecting Australian tech companies with India's growing digital ecosystem. Part of that stream of work is the India Tech Export Catalyst, and it works closely with startups, scale-ups, SMEs to create practical, actionable Indian market entry peers, to test them with Indian partners and to co-design. That program helps equip Australian companies with the market knowledge, expert feedback and connections to succeed in this vibrant ecosystem. And lastly, the Australia-India Strategic Research Fund, which continues to support scientists in India and Australia to collaborate on leading-edge research. So, closing on my brief remarks, I just wanted to emphasise that the India-Australia relationship is a win-win. It presents fertile ground for bilateral tech collaboration and entrepreneurship. For Australian business, it presents incredible opportunities to partner and innovate on a global scale here in India and for the world.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very insightful. Our next panelist is Ms. Riddhi Chopra, joining us online from San Francisco, is also a University of Melbourne former student with a Master of Management degree. Ms. Chopra is Investment Associate at Mercurius Media Capital, backing the next generation of consumer brands. Her experience spans strategy consulting in Sydney, accelerator, building in Silicon Valley, and early operational roles in India, working very closely with founders on fundraising and execution, drawing on cross-continental experiences. Over to you, Riddhi.
Thanks, Alia. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're all joining in from. It's almost midnight for me right here, so I'll have to apologize in advance if you catch me yawning during the session. Sorry about that. And of course, thank you so much to the university and Melbourne Connect. Feels great to be back within the UniMelb community. And of course, great to share this virtual stage with such incredible panelists. I work on the investments team at a fund called Mercurius Media Capital. We are a SF-based media for equity fund, and it happens to be the strategic investment arm of the Times of India Media Group. So here we invest from the Times of India Fund into the US companies. I invest in growth stage companies across the consumer spectrum. So starting from like consumer subscription, marketplace businesses, all the way going to product-based companies. A big part of my role is, of course, also supporting non-US founders expand into the US. In fact, Andrew, we work very close to with your colleagues from Australia here in SF through the Landing Pads program. So very excited to meet you. And goes without saying, we bet very heavily on Indian founders looking to expand into the US and their fundraising journeys as well. Prior to moving to the US, I lived in Australia for 5 years. That's where I got my master's from the University of Melbourne, and then moved to Sydney, where I now work, where I then worked as a strategy consultant at Combank and ANZ both. So very excited to be here again, and really excited to kind of get deeper into the conversation and talk more about the vantage points that I have across US, Australia, and India. Thank you.
Thank you, Riddhi. Our third panelist is Mr. Prateek Deshmukh, currently working as Program Director at the Atal Innovation Mission with Niti Aayog. Mr. Deshmukh is a civil engineer from IIT Delhi and holds an MBA in Finance and Strategy from Indian School of Business. With over a decade of experience in real estate sector, he pivoted to public policy and joined Government of India's flagship program with the vision of fostering a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship across India. He's leading the Atal Innovation Mission's Incubator Program and the RISE program in collaboration with CSIRO Australia. Handing over to you, Pradeep.
Hello all, I'm Prateek. Just to give you a background, I work at Atal Innovation Mission, which is housed at Niti Aayog, very close to this place. Niti Aayog is basically Government of India's think tank. And in 2016, they launched a dedicated mission, Atal Innovation Mission, with the objective of creating a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship across the country. So we run multiple programs targeting different section of the population, right from school children, where we have established 10,000 Atal Tinkering Labs, followed by incubation centers and community innovation centers targeting tier 2, tier 3 cities. And then we run challenges along with ministries to support startups and help solve problems of national priorities. So in 2023, the Prime Ministers of India and Australia had launched India-Australia RISE Accelerator. Thank you, Andrew, for giving the introduction about RISE. RISE is basically Rapid Innovation and Startup Expansion. So RISE Accelerator. The target was to solve problems of national priorities of India and Australia by startups, irrespective of where they are based. For example, if an Australian startup has created a solution that can solve an Indian problem, we get those startups and help them set up here, and vice versa. So the target was that we want to support 100 startups from India and Australia across 5 cohorts, mainly based on climate technology. So currently we are in our 3rd cohort. And so we have designed this program along with CSIRO, which is National Science Agency of Australia. And we work so closely with them that now it feels like a single team. So over these cohorts, we have designed this program just like how a student journey is designed. So it is a 9-month cohort, 2 parts, 4.5 months, 4.5 months. The first 4.5 months is the discovery phase, where like a student, They have lectures, learning modules. We get the best of the experts to deliver those lectures. We have kind of tuition teachers in the form of EIRs, who are experts who constantly handhold these startups. So this discovery phase helps Indian startups to know about the Australian market and the Australian markets to know about the Indian market. So we have two offline weeks, one in Australia, one in India, where we get all the startups together physically, once in Australia and once in India, and give them a live exposure of the country's ecosystem. We connect them to relevant people in that country. And after they have a deep understanding of the market, they develop a market entry plan. And the second phase of 4.5 months is the pilot phase, where they will execute their product in other country. Obviously, along with the support of Atal Innovation Mission, CSIRO, and EIRs. So this entire journey of of 9 months to share few success stories. One in cohort one, we had a Indian company called Kalishe that has a patented microorganism that can help in carbon capture. So it is a very unique solution and has won multiple awards in India. And now they have set up a company in Australia and are going to soon launch their product there. And you can understand that Australia has very stringent laws regarding microorganisms. So they were able to get those licenses. And similarly, in cohort 2, we had an Australian startup called Novolo. They had developed a coffee bean roasting technology. And they have been connected to the Coffee Board of India, and where we have one of the incubator in Coffee Board. And now they are working together and how they can use that technology on a larger scale in India. So there are like multiple such examples. So we are excited to see what comes after we are done with the 5 cohorts. And so thank you today for letting me share these experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prateek. Our final panelist today is Professor Dr. Mr. Tej Pawan Gandhok, who is a professor of practice in strategy and entrepreneurship and the director Ideate Lab with the Jindal Global Business School, OP Jindal Global University, and is a University of Melbourne alumnus. His applied research interests are in learning, innovation, leveraging immersive engagement, and biofeedback-based objective measures for better strategic thinking, and in better appreciating the role of subconscious cognitive processes for adaptive strategic decisions under high flux and uncertainty. That required some effort to even read. He's a serial entrepreneur with a strong track record of investor returns and successful exits, including startups, high growth, and turnarounds. He has 20 years of international senior partner level corporate advisory experience in country and regional head roles across Australia, USA, Southeast Asia, and India with strategy consulting and private equity firms. He also has worked in corporate strategy, technology management, and incubation, and as an engineer and research scientist. Could you please take over from me, Professor Gandho?
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure. Please call me Pavan. I'm alumnus from the University of Melbourne. I went there in the days of black and white TV. I graduated, I think I'm the oldest Melbourne Uni alum in Delhi. So it's wonderful to be back here. And it's a very opportune timing for me to be able to, pull together some synthesis from the remarks made by, my panelists before, because I think that there is, as Andrew laid out the case, there's certainly a tremendous opportunity and complementarity between Indian and Australian economies and the opportunities. And as a migrant, first generation migrant who moved to Australia in the early 80s, I see, and who's been sort of back here in India for the last 15, 20 years, I see a tremendous progress in both countries' appreciation of each other. And I think that almost mirrors the rise of the Indian cricket team and BCCI's prominence in the game of cricket. There's a similar dynamic at play. But having said that, if we think about, I wanted to share some remarks about where I think we can build on from the platform and the portfolio that we have. We have a tremendous portfolio of opportunities. Some of the examples that Prateek gave with Rise. The areas of mutual collaboration that Andrew pointed out, ag, med tech, clean tech. One area he didn't point out, which I think as a public intellectual, I would say in a post-Trump world, Australia clearly needs to be thinking about is defense tech and defense sourcing cooperation. The traditional AUKUS view and the traditional view of Australia relying on the US for strategic defense and the big ticket costs associated with that. A post-Ukraine war world clearly shows that the nature of sourcing and what is required is faster drones, faster capabilities, dynamic algorithms. So the places where you would look for that capability are very different. There are literally only 3 or 4 places in the world that you could find them: China, Iran, Israel, Russia, and possibly India. And then it's an interesting question of who can you rely on and who could you trust for stuff like that. So I would say over time, defense will probably get added to that. But the bigger point I would say is for the other 4 areas that we're already cooperating in, which is easier to talk about in the public space without faces turning red, is think about the initial focus has been on startups and at the smaller end of town. But if we think about innovation, one of the issues is that the dominant discourse in how we think about innovation has been excessively skewed in the past decade and a half by the discourse on the way digital innovation scaled up and got aggressively funded. Digital innovation over the past decade and a half, those so-called unicorns and megacorns and decacorns, have relied on 4 very unique conditions. Those 4 unique conditions do not exist in the areas of innovation that we're trying to drive in these 4 areas of ag tech, clean tech, med tech, etc. Those 4 unique conditions were number one, the most fundamental technological problems of physics and chemistry and what have you were already solved many decades ago. If you think about computation, storage, computing bandwidth, connectivity, whatever have you, all of those fundamental problems were solved 15 years prior to the last 15 years. And all that was happening was a very predictable cost curve, exponential decline. And so therefore, few kids in a garage could write software that could eat the world. The second condition was an incremental increasing returns on economics kind of phenomenon that these digital economics could leverage, where you as the innovator needed to put very little capital, you could leverage other people's capital investments, and you would get phenomenal returns, increasing economic returns over a period of time. That effect also tends not to exist in the 4 areas of interest to us. Thirdly, there was a FOMO-like possibility of investors of creating winner-take-all monopoly-like returns because most economic regulators could not understand the monopoly rent-seeking behavior in digital economics that was being observed because there was no obvious price signal or obvious consumer signals. So if I'm getting a little too technical for you, we can leave that for another moment. But the point is, these are fundamentally important things that people like Lena Khan and others have started to point out. But the point is, these kinds of conditions do not exist in these spheres that we're talking about. So here, we cannot afford to take the spray and pray venture capital type of approach. We need to add to our portfolio of innovation ecosystems, much more focused, much more patient, and much larger check size appetite pools of capital, where the starting check would be billions of dollars. So we need to orchestrate and think about international ecosystems for creating such consortia for risk sharing. The ideal combination would be something along the lines of the examples that were mentioned already by Andrew and Pratik, but we need to have much bigger check sizes and appetites in multi-billions of dollars. Let me take two quick examples of types of projects and applications that could benefit from this approach. By the way, the thing that they didn't mention, the third component that I would add is that this capital would be housed in one of the tax advantage areas like UAE or Singapore. So we could also capture the wealth capture returns in a much more tax effective way than what India and Australia provides, even though it would be Australian innovation and proof of concept and scale up on the Indian context. But if I give two examples, and I think many of the areas we just need to increase our focus on the part of the value chain where we have a comparative advantage that we can leverage India, Australia capabilities. So for example, in clean tech, there is unduly excessive focus on EV mobility and unduly excessive focus on lithium batteries. The moment you switch that focus and realize that the rate limiting constraint is stationary battery storage, then the kind of battery chemistries that you need that can provide and work effectively in that use case is a much broader range of battery chemistries that can come into play. The second thing is, so if you think about the PLI schemes and all of those things that we have and the relative utilization of those, we've kind of, been at the wrong end of trying to get solar panels or lithium battery manufacturing. This is the game to be played. For this, the interesting play is to understand that the non-battery component of stationary battery systems is still 40 to 50% of the cost, which is ridiculous when you start to break down what those individual components are. Some anode, some cathode, some AC-DC conversion, some housing material, and some battery management system software. Guess what? These things can be systematically brought down with frugal design, modular design, the containerization of storage systems analogy, et cetera. Much like what the analogy that Andrew described in the solar panel side of things, this can be done. And so if you think about the opportunity for Australian innovation to be scaled up in an Indian context, to then provide for the sort of investment that has gone in the undersea cable infrastructure to connect Darwin to Singapore for solar energy, the multipliers for that kind of investment in this kind of technology and scale up and global expansion are BIG huge. So that's one example of, and this is not stuff, with all due respect, that we can do with startups and small companies. We need to add to our portfolio of RISE with another acronym, but start with the bigger end. And think about this as a mission focus, the sorts of missions that have created ISRO and that launched safe COVID vaccines within a couple of years, and the type of approach we need to take here. The second example would be rare earth processing. All of the talk about rare earths and what have you, the fundamental point is that China has its dominant position in that space because of 30 to 40 years of visionary, persistent, patient capital. But the second thing is, it was their willingness to tolerate the enormous damage to the environment that rare earth processing causes. And so there are vast wastelands in Mongolia where this stuff is done that most other economies have chosen not to do. So the most obvious technology frontier to be solved is an environmentally effective way of processing these things. And so there should be a technology fund that should be specifically with mission focus, again, geographic contributions to balance risk. And obviously Australia and India and Korea and Japan stand hugely to benefit from something like this. And we can no longer rely on the US to consistently be in or out. So these would be two examples for where mission-focused, bigger end of innovation systems need to complement and build on the things that we're already doing. Let me wrap up there. Thank you very much.
That was RERY, very interesting. So thank you everyone for sharing your discerning experiences. And let's open up this conversation with one question, whichever panelist would like to take it. And then we can open and engage with the audience questions. What does innovation without border mean to you? And can you share one collaboration that changed your trajectory of or delivered an unexpected win?
I think that's a common thread that's run through all our remarks. I think at the core of it is recognizing diversity of perspectives is an advantage. You're pulling resources, you're bringing those different perspectives, you are more effectively testing for use cases. And that international collaboration is really key to Australian innovation.
In Australia, we are on a trajectory to be the first country in the world to eliminate cervical cancer through the HPV vaccine developed out of Australian universities through extensive research from Australian and international partners. That's an incredible emblematic story of that. In some of the sectors that we operate in for Austrade, and I only mentioned the superhighways in the roadmap, but we are doing work in other fields like critical technologies, defence, space. There are some great examples of Australian companies, Indian companies working together, pushing the envelope in these spaces that might not have the same level of profile. So there's an Australian company, Space Machines company, that is building componentry for satellites here in India and bringing that technology into Australia and other markets. So lots of great examples, but I think underlying Australia's innovation effort is the importance of these international partnerships and these diverse perspectives.
So at Atal Innovation Mission, we were thinking about our phase 2. So the biggest question was, how do you provide the access of innovation ecosystem to every innovator? What we realize is that innovation is not restricted to any particular individual. Anyone can be innovator. So one of the huge chunk that we tried to cater to was the non-English speaking population in India. So in India, only 11% of population, as per the last census, speaks English. And most of the material, most of the ecosystem caters to people who can speak in English. So, and India has many languages. So we started with the 22 scheduled languages that are in our constitution. So we thought about how do we remove the linguistic barrier from innovation. So we have designed a program and we are working on it. So this was like something which was right in front of us, but was never catered to in a way. And this can obviously go at international scale also, because there are multiple countries, multiple languages. How do you ensure that an innovator in any particular remote area speaking less spoken language, how do they get access to this entire ecosystem?
Really, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think again, we're living in a world where we do have borders, but I think innovation goes far beyond that. One of the companies that very recently I was working, so it was a state university here in California, and through the USAID program, which currently is not present anymore, but through them we were working on creating nutritional shots for reproductive health in women. So women that are pregnant, of course, like in underdeserved regions in India, nutritional deficiency runs rampant. And so we created nutritional shots that could go. And eventually with time, like once those shots were developed, we had like a few GTMs that were successful. We ran like a few proof of concepts. So people from here, from the US, the state university people, they were the ones creating it. We moved the manufacturing down to India, where we ran multiple POCs, and then eventually the same product was taken to Latin America, where again there's a similar problem. So I think a lot of countries go through the same problems. The innovation could come from some other place, the manufacturing could help somewhere else, and then eventually the product could keep flowing and moving across places. So yeah, I think it keeps going again, and similarly, like people and talent, like I was living in India, moved to Australia, now here in the US. So I think similar is the journey of people, and then they move together across the cycles of innovation and bring that tide along.
Great. would you like to add something? Sir?
So I'm going to say something more firmly tongue in cheek on this because as Andrew said, I think we've covered many of the points about this already. So to my mind, this is so obvious if you just look at IPL. I mean, when you started seeing Ricky Ponting playing in blue and MS Dhoni playing in yellow, there was a bit of a cognitive dissonance. But if you realize what a large part of earnings and wealth creation for anybody associated in Australia with cricket now has to do with being part of the Indian system, whether you are a YouTube podcaster or a coach or whatever, or a player. So the point I'm trying to make is if you look at that analogy, we don't need to talk about cliches and mother statements or anything across borders. There's clearly happening, mega dollars are flowing. I think the dot that hasn't yet been joined is for capitalists and investors and entrepreneurs in Australia to adequately and sufficiently recognize that the early stage risk capital ecosystem in India is an order of magnitude bigger than the one in Australia. The value capture opportunities, if you look at the IPO markets and whatever have you, and exit possibilities are possibly even bigger. So that dot's just waiting to be joined, I think. IPL was about 10 years, 12 years. So it's now a question, how quickly can smart people join this dot and then make it tax effective, routing it out of Dubai or Singapore. Which is what I do, and that's why I enjoy my life.
So anyone in the audience would like to ask any questions? Otherwise.
I think one of the things which I have noticed is just like Israel, they have a tendency of having innovation everywhere, schools, colleges, whoever you are. But I feel that is lacking, maybe at a global scale, but particularly India and Australia. The innovation is scattered, right? So everybody has an ideas, but if you develop a protocol, a system in which you think about innovation all the time, so rather than saying just some people think, everybody thinks I know, but if you have a system where people think that way only all the time, so you'll solve a lot of problems. So the foundation is not there right now, I think, because we are repeating what we have learned for the last 100 years, same thing over and over again. So where would the innovation come from? It won't. Unless their thinking is changed, which means that you have to think in systems, you have to think in first principles. How did it come about? What can we do to make it better? So for example, about Indian farming, right? So we are a cow-based country earlier. Now it's full of fertilizers. So we have lost our systems. Same thing, Australia is a lot on farming. So I'm not sure what they're doing, but India has a problem of a lot of fertilizers. So a lot of things like our soil is getting destroyed because population is a big population in India. We have to feed them cheaply. So what do? Well, you just use whatever the cheapest option is. But that's not called innovation. It's just destroying agriculture or other soils. And so anyways, what I was trying to add to here was that with innovation and with cross-border innovations, there needs to be a fundamental method which is probably developed and then maybe brought on with these two countries, like just the way we talk about IPL, right? So let's use the best minds to build up models, and then everybody can use it to develop whatever they want to develop for anything. And that's possible because I think humans have the capability of thinking, but the problem is they're lost in their own mind. So we have to really summarize fundamentals with them, and then innovation will happen at a very large scale. Israel is a very good example of that. And because what I've heard is that their level of innovation is everywhere, not just some people. Everybody thinks that way. So anyways, that's something to think about.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have more questions?
I think I'm okay without it.
Do you recall?
So this is for Mr. Carter, the question. So I know that one of the pathways for innovation that you rightly mentioned is education, and that has strong policy emphasis in the India-Australia relations at the moment. So how do you think will vocational education and training boost innovation? And there are institutions which are very strong in Australia when it comes to VET, but that is something that India is still working on, although there is a lot of emphasis on the national education policy about it. So how do you think that VET might boost innovation and help both countries have long-term impacts on employment and in life?
Thank you. It's a great question. I'm glad you brought up vocational education. Absolutely, it's a really important part of the innovation story. And in the Australian context, I think one of the strengths, the lesson that we've learnt is trying to maximize the amount of industry co-design so that the skills that students acquire through the system is very, very practical and directly applicable. So absolutely, it's an important part of the story because, you can drive innovation through, technical skills that are focused on process innovation, for example, that are done on the factory floor rather than, such a what would be more of an academic domain in collaboration. So very practical focus in vocational education, absolutely. It's an area we recognise has significant opportunity in India. Obviously, India, vast youth demographic. To capture the benefit of that demographic dividend, India needs to create good jobs and it needs to educate its youth. And a lot of that portion of the workforce is quite adept for technical skilling. So we want to support more partnerships for Australian institutions with Indian partners here. It does require a bit of innovative thinking about business models and tailoring them for the Indian context, including at an appropriate price point for this market. But we do have some great examples. I mean, I'd highlight Kangan and their partnerships in Gujarat focused on automotive skill sets. Obviously, that's very important with Gujarat becoming an emerging centre for vehicle manufacturing. So there are countless examples, and I'm glad you raised it. I think India's ambition to be skills capital of the world, Australia can play a growing part in helping achieve that vision.
I just wanted to add, just building on this point that Andrew made, I think one other very interesting cross-border economic value capture opportunity is exactly on that. I mean, if you think about the amount of Australian public purse spending on services in aged care, childcare, whatever have you, and the enormous skill gap issues, the possibility of remote working and fly in, fly out working, as well as AI-based opportunities focused in that particular area, is also, I think, a very, very, it's a billion-dollar, several billion-dollar venture opportunity ideas waiting to happen. I think currently, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more local Australian-based rewards, scam type things, people taking advantage of the huge amount of funding, but there are very credible, ethical, innovation-based, opportunities that could be created. And I'm looking at you to leverage that.
My question is regarding AI literacy. So I want to talk about this topic in two aspects. With AI, in terms of AI literacy, we know that how the job market is upending with the AI transformation, and the education itself, we don't know how it would look like 5 years from now, right? So how are we thinking about the giving AI education, AI literacy or AI related education, whether it's technical or non-technical, to the existing set of people who are in college, because they won't know what type of job they would be doing after when they graduate, right? So that's the first aspect. And the second is, how are we using AI to innovate, as in AI in research, right? So currently 2 Nobel Prizes were given to people in physics and biology who were pioneers in AI. So how are we, as a collaborative strategic initiative, how are we thinking in this direction?
I mean, that's a very broad question. I'll just take the first part of your question and just share my own personal views or what we're experimenting with. I don't think, I think the first step to my mind, the way, this is what I try to do at JGU or with your students, is just break down AI, demystify the word, and let's start talking about different specific applications. Are we talking about speech to text? Are we talking about, vision recognition? What are we talking about, right? And even within generative, which aspects are we talking about? So I think that is the first starting point to demystify and de-hype. The second part of this is the arc of technology adoption by humans clearly shows that whenever these things come along, the superior cognitive skilled humans increase productivity and output effectiveness and get a disproportionate part of the economy's returns available. The average users actually, lose basic human abilities and go further down the value chain. This is true from the transition. If you think about the transition from agricultural to industrial economy, the physical strength of the average human, how much that's declined over a period of time. If you think about the adoption of calculators and spreadsheets, the mental arithmetic ability of the average human, as well as just the ability for short-term memory retention of new numbers, how much that's gone down literally in the last couple of decades. So this is a well-known fact. It's a sad fact, but I personally am starting to become a bit more despondent that perhaps the nature of capitalism is to get income inequality to a point that some revolution happens, and that's probably what explains, why civilizations keep kind of popping off. But that's a slightly dark view, but just leave that to one side. But coming back to the point I'm going to make is that the adoption of AI tools is just a continuation of that arc. So you will continue to see the same behavior that the average user, and we're already seeing that among students, and there's increasing availability of research that shows the cognitive declines when people merely just get an LLM to churn out a bunch of stuff, and there are hashtags or enshittification and AI slop and whatever starting to gain popularity. But you can clearly see the cognitive effects on people's brain processing. But at the same time, what we try to focus on for the cream of the crop, the people who kind of almost self-select when they come into our incubator or are interested in entrepreneurial activity, is we increasingly push back to them and say, demystify and get rid of this AI hype. Instead of looking for funding to hire a developer to build your app, let's see if we can build the first one ourselves with low-code, no-code tools. And I think a lot of progress and a lot of that adoption can be done. So that's as far as the first aspect. So I would say a lot of that's applied, and a lot of that is almost up to, I think also part of this is changing the approach of being taught to learning oneself. इसके लिए कोई degree नहीं चाहिए, इसके लिए कोई ठप्पा नहीं चाहिए, इसके लिए सिर्फ एक demonstrable skill की ज़रूरत है. You just need to be able to demonstrate your ability to do stuff, and just show that, right? That, by the way, is the whole reason why these so-called masters in quantitative analytics are yielding very poor outcomes for people who are doing this, because the industry only wants the capability. They don't care about the qualification, right? So I think that's the first part of your question. So let me leave it at that and give others an opportunity if they want to about the other.
I'm not sure what I can add to that. It's kind of exciting and daunting at the same time. I mean, for AI, this is obviously such a fast moving space. And in terms of how we help manage the challenges, I mean, obviously universities, our education system is at the forefront. I think it is about trying to demystify it. Yes, it's a revolution, but it's also a progression. So let's sort of focus on naturally, the government perspective is let's try to maximize the benefits from these tools while mitigating the risks, create ethical frameworks while back opportunities to deploy it in priority sectors where we can see the results. And so, in the agriculture context, we see things like AI combined with sensors that enhances our ability to do, say, soil carbon sequestration. The sky's the limit for all these different applications. So there's a lot of opportunity, but yes, no one, I think, given the pace of change here, has a perfect solution in place.
So I don't know what is happening in the colleges, but at least at school level, what we are trying to do is teach the students basics, because information is now readily available. You cannot teach them facts and information, and that style of teaching is no longer relevant. So we want to give these students access to these skills, that these are the skills, these are the problems. First stage is how do you identify a problem? And second is how do you use these skills to solve this problem? So I feel that the skills of problem solving, creativity, curiosity, all these skills will become relevant, because uh, after AI, you don't know what new technology will come. So uh, I heard this very good line in one of the podcasts, that we need to teach students how to learn, learn to learn. Instead of teaching them particular subjects, teach them how to learn, and they will automatically pick up whatever new is coming their way.
Thank you so much. I think I have one question in continuation to you, Pratik, and then one for Riddhi, and then we can wrap this up quickly. Pratik, what are some of the unique cultural or operational considerations that have emerged in the cross-border context of the RISE Accelerator program? And can you tell us how both Atal Innovation Mission and CSIRO have worked together to navigate them?
So surprisingly, from our experiences, there were not many cultural challenges that we faced. Actually, when these guys interacted during the respective India and Australia weeks, like they gelled in so well, because the core thinking was the same, because all of them were entrepreneurs. They had the same way of thinking, that what we are trying to solve, when they have their own technology, and looking at the market and all. So the core principles were the same. So in that way, I don't think we had that kind of a challenge, except the spicy food that they had to eat in India. So leaving that aside, but otherwise, that part was sorted. And even in operations aspect, we were fortunate to have great partners at India level also, as well as in Australia also. So we had universities from Australia working with the Indian startups, and we had industry partners, academic partners who are willing to work with Australian companies. So in a way, I think this was like a perfect match that came together.
Great, great, good to know. And Riddhi, if you're ready, I have a question for you. As an investor with global experience, what do you see the biggest opportunities and challenges for startups operating across jurisdictions? And what advice would you give founders looking to scale internationally?
Um, so I think in terms of opportunities, of course, goes without saying, bigger the market, more diverse customers, bigger is the TAM. So that's one of the clear upside of going cross-border, which is going to be bigger markets, wider customer pools. It's a way to go faster, stress test, get different product market fit, and understand different kind of user behaviors. However, at the same time, whilst this can be a big opportunity, I think it's very important to kind of understand the challenge over here. You really have to be very mindful of knowing where you begin, what your go to market strategy is going to be like. So, for instance, if I were somebody in India, I think it's a great place to kind of really manufacture your product, to really do the stress testing. Go to Australia. Australia is a place with like high compliances, regulations, whether you're talking about health tech, biotech, you go with AI, digital infra, clean tech, everything that we've spoken about in the panel. So, once I've developed a product like this, I'd probably want to move to markets like Europe or Australia, get those certifications and compliances in, and show to the world that, I'm a Australia compliant product. And then probably as an opportunity, that's when I'd go to US. US becoming the biggest capital market of all. That's where literally all the money is. So that's where I'll go there to fundraise. And then once you've got those POCs and you show it to the investors, uh, that's when, and I think the best part about one of the biggest opportunities that I'd consider in fundraising is that while sometimes valuation when you raising in India could be a little higher, American investors don't really shy away from those numbers. So, you'd probably be able to secure like a higher valuation whilst getting that funding in, as opposed to probably having those kind of struggles if you're operating in the Indian market. But again, now that we're working in like AI, it's important to understand that compliances go very heavy. So, think about compliances first off, not as a feature, but that should be your product. So think about the country you'd want to start scaling in and start developing there on. Keep in mind the tax, the regulations, everything that goes on. So whether it's GDPR in Europe or whether it's the data rules in India, keep in mind of the diverse product that you want to build and then the kind of niche that you'd probably have when you're going country-wise. So that would be a mix of opportunities and challenges that you can possibly have when you're doing the innovation cross-border.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think in continuation with that and to reference to that, I have one last question to Andrew. May I? From your vantage point at Austrade, how is Australia-India innovation relation evolving? What role does government policy play in enabling deeper collaborations between our startup ecosystems? And where do you see the greatest potential for growth? Sorry for a difficult.
Not at all. Great question to close. I mean, so much of this is being driven by individual businesses, innovators, companies, startups. So, they're at the forefront, but it's government's responsibility, contribution to create supportive architectures and arrangements. So we've touched on a few of those programs, like the Strategic Research Fund. I wanted to highlight actually a bit of a plug for a new initiative, the Renewable Energy Partnership, that was agreed bilaterally by Prime Ministers. So that has a range of work streams, but there's one in there which takes a little bit of a different tack in terms of innovation linkages. And that's run by our CSIRO, where they're engaging a set of Indian industry players to obtain their problem statements and then facilitating connections through to Australian research groups to help bridge Australian research and have direct commercial application in the Indian context and get it to market quickly. So that's more of the focus for my agency, a bit more on the sort of, the companies at that level of maturity to move quickly, but there is a whole web of support for startups. And I mean, the RISE Accelerator is a banner example of that.
Great. Thank you so much for putting in your energies and ideas for us. This is very edifying. Sometimes, like raindrops tapping gently on the window, fine conversations blossom where we least expected. No poetry. Wisdom finds its voice, not in the boardroom, but over refreshments and laughter. So with a touch of Australian brunetti, served with Indian style, sir. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And let's please join these discussions over like refreshments outside at the reception. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. And we will send some your way.
Saying I'm late.
You can stay now. You can just go straight into breakfast.
I can, absolutely. Some Australian coffee would be really nice. That's something that I'm missing. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Have a
for
good
having me.
night, Riddhi. And thank you, everyone. Let's join there. Thank you.
I